Before we begin, I just want to acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territories of the First Nations and Native American peoples. Here where I am in Vancouver, those peoples are the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. But I know where many of you are, you're on the land of other nations. Always, but especially during this most difficult time, let us remember our connection to our sisters and brothers in these nations and pray for the day in which we might be with them in right relationship. Welcome. Welcome to Living Interfaith. Know that the whole of you is welcome. You're not asked to leave who you are in your own homes. Please bring who you are in with you. What you are asked to remember is that everyone around you has brought who they are in with them as well. And all of goodwill are welcome. Now let us sing.
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of living, ours is no care of despair. Come yet again, come.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Welcome, friends. So I have just a few announcements before we get going. The first one is immediately after the service, we're going to have our annual council meeting. Everyone's welcome to attend. I promise we won't let it get too boring or too long. We are going to be bidding adieu to our longstanding council member, Peter Sanders, and warmly welcoming our two new council members, Sheila Cook and Sandy Wong. Both of whom I promise will be here later. I know folks have a couple meetings going on this morning, but Sheila is with us. Thank you, Sheila. So if you have the time and interest, we'd love to have you join us. Thank you. Tomorrow evening, June 6th at 6:30 p.m., there's going to be a sacred circle of prayer for the 215 children who died at Kamloops Indian Residential School. This event is being organized by Vincent Solomon from the VST Indigenous Studies program, whom some of us here know. But it's open to everyone. Here, I can put the Zoom information in the chat. So it's going to be tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, or sorry, Pacific Daylight Time. Let me just figure out where the chat is. Here we go.
Kathy, I have 7 p.m. Central. Is that for Vince Solomon?
I'm sorry, I had the event from you, so you would know better than me. So
okay. So okay. I will
7 p.m. Central.
Yeah, I will. It's on the Anglican Facebook page for sure. I think they're sending out information as they come as well. So later on, it'll be for the link will be there.
Oh, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So on the Anglican Facebook page. Okay, that sounds great. Thank you, Sheila. This coming Wednesday, June 9th at 7 p.m., we're going to be holding our last World Studies Scripture session with Harold Rosen. We've been covering a great many traditions already over the last 10 months. It's been a lot of fun and quite the fire hose of information. And we're going to finish up this week with an overview of some Indigenous wisdom, which should be beautiful. So if you're interested, please email me and I can get you the Zoom link That's going to be Wednesday, 7 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And finally, the Living Interfaith Church, which is our sister congregation, will be meeting next Saturday, June 12th at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And let me know if you're interested, and I'll get you the Zoom link. So that's all that I know about. Friends, is there anything else that the community should know about? Please feel free to share it now. All right, thank you. Amar looks like he has something, but I think he's just waving at everybody.
Looking to the highball line.
Okay, so now if we come into silence for our opening prayer, and I'm actually going to share it here. Leslie will be leading it with us.
So you'll scroll through as we go. I'm going to read from my book. If everybody can follow through, and then when we get to the line that is in bold, teach us and show us the way. If all of us can say that together. This is a litany from the Chinook First Nation in what is now known as the United States. We call upon the earth, our planet home, with its beautiful depths and soaring heights, its vitality and abundance of life. And together we ask that it teach us and show us the way. We call upon the mountains, the Cascades, and the Olympics, the high green valleys and meadows filled with wild flowers, the snows that never melt, the summits of intense silence. And we ask that they teach us and show us the way. We call upon the waters that rim the earth, horizon to horizon, that flow in our rivers and streams, that fall upon our gardens and fields. We ask that they teach us and show us the way. We call upon the land which grows our food, the nurturing soil, the fertile fields, the abundant gardens and orchards. We ask that they teach us and show us the way. We call upon the forests, the great trees reaching strongly to the sky, with earth in their roots and the heavens in their branches, the fir and the pine and the cedar, and we ask them to teach us and show us the way. We call upon the creatures of the fields and forests and the seas, our brothers and sisters, the wolves and deer, the eagle and dove, the great whales and the dolphin, the beautiful orca and salmon, who share our Northwest home. We ask them to teach us and show us the way. We call upon all those who have lived on this earth, our ancestors and our friends, who dreamed the best for future generations, and upon whose lives our lives are built. And with thanksgiving, we call upon them to teach us and show us the way. And lastly, we call upon all we hold most sacred, the presence and power of the great spirit of love and truth, which flows through all the universe, to be with us, to teach us and show us the way.
Thank you so much. May all I say and all I think be in harmony with thee, God within me, God beyond me, the maker of the trees. Also from the Chinook. Now, friends, if you'll unmute yourselves, we'll do a passing of the peace. This is where we say something like, peace be with you. Peace be with you as well. Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam. Peace.
Peace
Peace be with you. Peace be with you. Assalamu alaikum.
Peace to all.
Peace with you, my friends.
All our relations.
With you.
Peace be
Peace
with
be
you.
with you.
Peace.
Peace. Thank you. Now let us sing.
Bhavane Guru Pani Pita Mata Darata Mata Bhavane Guru Pani Pita Mata Darata Mata Diva Sarat Dore Dai Daya Kere Sagana Jagata Diva Sarat Dore Dai Daya Kere Sagana Jagata Bhavane Guru Pani Pita Mata Darata Mata Bhavane Guru Pani Pita Mata Darata Mata Diva Sarat Dore Dai Daya Kele Sagana Jagata Diva Sarat Dore Dai Daya Kele Sagana Jagata Bhavane Guru Pani Pita Mata Darata Mata Bhavane Guru Pani Pita Mata Darata Mata
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Now, if you'll join me in our joint affirmation. We come together in peace. We sing together in joy and with love. We worship together in one house, a house with names beyond number. Our paths are many, our beliefs are as leaves, and the tree that we cleave to is nourished by the light of compassion, justice, and mutual respect. May our lives, our beliefs, and our actions help to bring about the world of love we all seek. And let it begin here. So now is when we usually pray in our own homes and in our own ways, for something going on in the world. For those of us here in Canada, especially in BC, and hopefully for all of us, we've just been so in grief this last week since they found the bodies of the 215 children at Kamloops Kamloops Indian Residential School. These children, as well as around 150,000 others, had been ripped from their loving families and communities and forcibly enrolled in one of the 139 residential schools that had operated across Canada between the years 1831 and 1996, which means that the last residential school only closed 25 years ago. So this is very much a living history, something that just happened, that people who went to these schools are still alive right now, or perhaps just slightly older than me, younger than many of us here in this community. And the legacy of this, all the hurt and trauma and pain of knowing that your government and the churches and the whole society conspired around you to steal your children, to force them to try to be different from you, to separate them from you as much as possible, and then to mistreat them, to abuse them, and in many cases, murder them. It's just an unbelievable legacy and suffering that we have here in Canada now. So unfortunately, this mass grave that was discovered is just one of what is probably many. I guess a few years ago, another 50 bodies were found at a different school. I was talking to someone this week about how it's actually additionally upsetting that it was a private company that found the bodies. It isn't as though the government has gone to the schools and done any kind of extensive search to try to open the mass graves, to enable healing to come and to enable the bodies to be returned to their families. So that's something even worse on top of everything else this happened. So we want to take some time now to honor them. So I wasn't sure how this would work for folks. So as many of you know, I myself am Buddhist, and a grief ritual that we do in Buddhism is chanting Om Mani Padme Hum. That's the prayer of compassion. Directly translated, Om Mani Padme Hum means hark the jewel of the lotus, or praise to the jewel in the lotus. The idea in the lotus is that it's a flower that comes up out of the mud and is still so beautiful and lush, but it only got that way growing in the mud. So there's so much suffering and pain and hurt, but something beautiful comes from it anyway, and there's the jewel in it. And in the Buddhist tradition, we believe that's the Buddha and the teachings that come out of the muck of suffering. So praying Om Mani Padme Hum is praying for those who are suffering, praying for those who've been injured or hurt or killed or who have died, sending them compassion, and also seeing your connection to these beings. There are a lot of beliefs about the mantra that when you're praying it, that's how you're connecting and easing the suffering of all beings. So as I'm sure you've seen the prayer flags, the beautiful colored prayer flags, they have something written on them in Sanskrit, and that's Om Mani Padme Hum. And you hang them up on mountains and in trees and in places where the wind moves the flags, and it ignites the prayer to pray for all beings. So after my brother died, I took my mala, which are my prayer beads, which those of us in many different traditions have something like this. We call them a mala. And it has 108 beads on it, regular beads. And you chant, you do a whole mala's worth of Om Mani Padme Hum prayers. So unfortunately, we don't have time to do a whole mala's worth 215 times, but we do have enough time to pray Om Mani Padme Hum 215 times, which is about 2 malas. So folks can pray in their own ways, but for probably what will be about the 10 minutes, I'm going to pray Om Mani Padme Hum for all of the children. All the children who were found, plus those who were not. And then I invite you to, if it is your tradition or your practice, to burn sage or tobacco, because that's what the earth needs or what we need. Invite you to do that. For me, it's incense. So I'll be burning incense here. And I invite you to burn whatever herbs you have that are helpful at this time. And I hope we can do this in a good way. Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 Now I'd like to open up this space. If anyone would like to share their own experiences, their own connection, their own feelings this week. We'd love to hear from you, friends.
I can't imagine what it would be like having, having two wonderful kids who I love so much, to have them taken away and be taught to not be kind of separated from their culture and their parents and their background. So yeah, and like having an entire society where that happens to all your kids, that's just it's heartbreaking.
There was a poem that was posted on Facebook that was written by Abigail Echo Hawk. And, it gave my heart such comfort, her words. And I'm wondering, may I read the poem, Kathy? Would that be okay? It's just a short one. I'll try to get through it. When they buried the children, what they didn't know, they were lovingly embraced by the land, held and cradled in a mother's heart. The trees wept for them with the wind. They sang mourning songs their mothers didn't know to sing, bending branches to touch the earth around them. The Creator cried for them, the tears falling like rain. Mother Earth held them until they could be found. Now our voices sing the morning songs with the trees, the wind. Light sacred fire, ensure they're never forgotten as we sing justice.
I have a prayer, Kathy. I don't know if you want me to read it at the end, maybe. It's just sort of a closing prayer. But I just want to say that it's so beautiful to be here. It's been a week or many days of services for me, and such consolation in this time. Our Indigenous brothers and sisters, my uncles and aunts are all gone. And so they've had many stories that are very personal in what they had to actually do. Many of these sites were dug by the children themselves, being told to go do it and bury their friends and family. So they know. Maps have been written across the country and stories have been brought forward, and many of our families are no longer alive to see what will become of their stories, what will become of their experience. So it's the people that will make change. It is not institutions. It's the public that have to take ownership of their hearts and help us remember. Indigenous spirituality, which covers the globe, which is that prayer that Kathy gave us, will hold us all. It is universal. It is an understanding. It is how we breathe. Gabor Mate, in his book coming up in April next year, we often think of expectation, and we think we have expectation, but that isn't the case. We know as children that we are expectation, and he says that as the lungs were developed as an expectation for oxygen, we are expectation. We are all expectation for right relationship, for love, for compassion, for gentleness, for the entire spectrum of what love is, from that gentle love to fierce love and firm love. And so in this grieving time, we are closer to our hearts and the stories that we all can remember, that make us one. So let us be filled with that water. Let us be filled with that living water that we all know is universal. And I was just so happy to get here today. It's been a long week, and we need to have this in the forefront of our minds when we think of our brothers and sisters throughout the world that only have known strife, that have only experienced institution in the way of their gods, in the way of light. And we need to be their feet and their voices. So thank you.
Oh, Kathy, I found something I'd like to share. It's a prayer that could be called the prayer for the lost children. And it's from the son of the founder of the Baha'i faith. And to me, it feels like it's talking about those 215 souls. I pray in behalf of these young souls, begging confirmation and assistance for them from the kingdom of heaven. May each one be trained under the shadow of the protection of God. May each become like a lighted candle in the world of humanity, and a tender and growing plant in the garden of eternity. I pray that these children may be so nurtured and educated that they shall give life to all who dwell on earth, that they may receive insight, that they may bestow hearing upon the people of the world, and that they may become endowed with such virtues and qualities that their mothers, fathers, and relatives will be thankful to God, well pleased and hopeful. This is my wish and prayer, O Creator, thou who art kind and powerful, thou who art merciful and generous, the Lord of surpassing bounty.
Thank you so much, Harold and Sheila. Thank you. Thank you, friends, for being here today and for mourning these children and their families. I have one final part for us right now. We mourn now with our Indigenous friends and community members and pray that these children may not have died in vain. We pray for open eyes to see the injustices faced by oppressed members in our society every day. We pray for open ears to listen to their stories fully without fear or defensiveness. We pray for open hearts that will enable us to care as much for the stranger as we do for those who look and think and act and pray like us. And we pray for open minds that will allow us to find new ways to fix these broken systems so that no more children, families, or nations may be shattered again. Mane Padme Hum. All my relations. When you're ready, let us sing.
This is an Indigenous song of lament from the Guarani people of Paraguay in solidarity with the children of Kamloops.
Thank you so much. Now is when I usually put out a call for donations. In lieu of that, for us this week, I want to call attention to the Indian Residential School Survivor Society, located on the North Shore here in BC. I'm going to put a link to their page and their donation page in the chat, and any contributions that you can make to them. Also, I know the Orange Shirt Society has released their shirt early this year. Usually they release it around Orange Shirt Day at the end of September, but they are taking orders, and I was happy to see that they were sold out of certain sizes yesterday. So that's another good cause right now to support childcare. I think it's the Aboriginal Childcare Society. So thank you so much. Any other causes that we should keep in our minds right now? Please let us know. In lieu of that, let us sing.
From you I receive, to you I give.
Thank you so much. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Steve Crawford. Steve and I are longtime friends. He's one of the founders of the Living Interfaith Church, our sister congregation. And I don't know if he's still the guiding president. He was the guiding president. No, maybe before. I know he's done it off and on.
I've been president. I'm currently the vice president.
Okay, but you were also the president of Jamal Rahman's community interfaith.
I am a current co-president of the Interfaith Community Sanctuary, yes.
So we were very lucky to have him here today. He belongs to 3 different interfaith groups, so that is pretty cool. And I believe you identify as a humanist. I don't know, is that...
Spiritual humanist. It's a little bit different. I'm going to explain it just a little bit. So
fantastic. Thank you. And you're here to talk to us about World Environment Day.
Yes.
So thank you so much. Let's turn it over to Steve.
And do I still have the time frame of about 10 to 15 minutes? Is that?
You do, yes. Okay. Don't worry. We usually run over anyway, and our people are very...
Okay, great. Well, it's a real honor to speak to everyone. And it almost seems odd to me to switch topics a little bit after talking about that horrible practice that happened with the children from Native American communities. But I'm going to just tweak it a little bit, because most of the harm that we do as human beings to the planet, to ourselves, to others, it's really one problem. And it's the process of otherization. It's having a worldview that is separatist. And we have infinite forms of this. It can be a lack of worthiness to ourselves. Somehow we're less worthy than the people around us. It can be on an individual one-to-one basis where someone is otherized, and that is used as a justification for treating them poorly, all the way from annoying slights to violence and murder and genocide. And this is our big problem. And it's a difficult one to have great movement on. I think we're making some progress, but every time a person is born, they are this incredibly fine-tuned learning machine or organism. And they start learning about the world. And depending upon the interactions that they have with their parents or whoever the caregivers are, or their experiences with other human beings, they form a model of the world. And that's the only way we can get through the world, because we have these finite brains, and we have to make a model of what life is and how we fit in that pattern. And so that has to be taught anew and anew. And it's because we're not perfect. I don't really even know what perfect is, but because we're not perfect, there are always slights and imbalances that lead to separation in our minds. And that is the root of the problem. And that's what the problem is that we have with the environment, with what's going on with that. So I'm going to be looking at the environment and how we treat the other beings. Kathy, in your email, you said how we treat the other beings in the environment, which I liked more than just calling the other species, because they are beings just like us. They're just different kinds of beings, our cousins, you could say. And I'm looking at it through the lens of spiritual humanism, which takes both our rational and our emotional lives together to look out at the world and try to make sense of it, and how to learn how to act. And they're both very important. And some people are more emotional, some people are more rational. We really need both. We need both to have a good functioning system. I'm going to use a little bit of scientific information in the presentation. It's important to remember science is only a tool. It helps us figure out how things work, but it is up to human beings to use that information to find meaning and to apply morals, ethics, what's good, what's bad. And we do this through our philosophy, our spirituality, and our religious faith, and each in our own way. Now, the environment is nothing more than the conditions in which we live. And just like if you go to Mars, the conditions are not very favorable to us. But here on Earth, they are. Well, why is that? Because we share the planet with this incredibly diverse number of species, all different kinds of life. So it's biodiversity. And the more biodiversity you have, then the greater the whole thing comes together to support life. And for us, we need oxygen, we need clean air, we need clean water, we need plant pollination, we need wastewater treatment, so the water that evaporates from the oceans and lakes comes down, it goes through all the biodiversity filter down into the groundwater and is cleansed by that. That's the miracle. That's how water gets clean. And we need biomatter decomposition and recycling. So life forms die, something has to happen with them. So we have this incredible, diverse microbial and fungi world that takes that matter and recycles it so it can be used again. And we need all of this. And most people agree on that. Nothing I've said there is at all controversial. So what's gone wrong? Because most of the history of Homo sapiens on this planet, we had a very nice environment. But with the introduction of industrialization, primarily starting in Western culture, we started to learn about how some of the laws of the universe work. So we were able to manipulate energy, create burn fuels, and this had far-ranging effects on the environment that we had never seen before in the history of humanity. And I think when people first started to do this, they probably were a little innocent. I'm going to give them some of the benefit of the doubt. They didn't really know the far-reaching effects. But after a while, it became obvious. I mean, we were seeing poisonous air. We were seeing polluted water. The information was right in front of us. And it would have been nice if people said, we need to pull back. We need to progress in a way that this is not happening. But obviously that did not happen. So people engaged in willful disregard of the harm that was happening through all the manufacturing and the fossil fuel burning. And this is just another version of the separatist worldview. I mean, most of it happened for money and power, and they just felt it didn't matter what happened to the other people because they were gaining. So it was us versus them, unfortunately. Now, there are infinite forms, like I've said before, of separatist worldviews, and one of the most pernicious and tenacious is patriarchy, which we've talked about here, where men don't treat women of equal value, and so a lot of harm happens. And then there's a lot of men who were not treating the environment the same way, that like the environment doesn't have rights. So, and of course, it's not all men. I mean, women participate in this as well. But it's that kind of separation and otherization where we get to do what we want, and if other people are hurt, that's just too bad, because we gain from that. Now, we're making some progress because solar and wind generation and batteries are really coming to the forefront, and that's going to save us a lot of carbon going into the atmosphere to slow down global warming. And then we need social movements, and we had some of those come to the forefront with the women's movement, Black Lives Matter, and the environmental movement. So there is some hope there. But even if we do everything right, we are going to reap a lot of woe. Global warming isn't going to get stopped in time. There's probably going to be massive sea rise, and people who live in the lowlands are going to have to move. That's coming. I don't see how that is avoided, unfortunately. I want to talk just a little bit about the history of life, and this pertains to what is our responsibility in how we treat the other beings that we share this planet with. And we have learned quite a bit about the history of life, and we now know that all life that currently exists, if you trace back its ancestral lines, it all leads to bacteria. We don't exactly know how bacteria got started. single-celled organisms. The oldest fossilized form of life that we have found is fossilized bacteria, and that is about 3.5 billion years old. And it's important, you say billion, sometimes it doesn't seem as long, but it's 3,500 cycles of a million-year cycle. That's how many millions of years passed while bacteria were living. And for at least 2 billion years, bacteria was the only life form, and it underwent chemical and social evolution that brought forth animals and plants, and eventually us. And so there was some random mutations that happened that were beneficial. Bacteria are social, and they actually extrude little tubules between them and send genetic information back and forth. And this helps with regard to fitness. So, and the other is symbiogenesis. Bacteria eat other bacteria. Life eats life. And so what happens sometimes is one bacteria consumes another, but it brings it inside the cell, but bacteria resist inside the cell, and they didn't die. And this becomes a new being. So this is how we got mitochondria in all of our cells. The mitochondria was a separate organism that was subsumed, and mitochondria is in plants. Also chloroplasts, how photosynthesis happens in cells. It was probably a bacteria that was photosynthesizing, and it was subsumed in another bacteria. So that's basically how bacteria gave birth to all this wonderful life that we now experience. Now, with regard to our extended family, the hominids, they came on the scene about 3 million years ago, and our own particular species is only 300,000 years old. So hardly a blip on the timeline. And what does this mean? I'm going to come back to it after I go over one other further cosmic connection. So all life is connected. Now, through science, we have revealed another universal connection. And this one, when I first learned about it, sort of blew my mind. I also found just the fact that all life is ancestrally connected is also mind-blowing. But through particle physics and the Standard Model and using colliders, we have found out that all matter, which includes our bodies, the furniture we're currently sitting on, plants, dirt, the planet, everything is made of subatomic particles, quarks and leptons. And we've been able to determine that these tiny particles that come together to make up the atoms and the molecules and everything that we see, they have little tiny electrical charges. They are dualistic in that sometimes they act as waves, sometimes they act as particles. They appear to be eternal, and they appear to be, if you take the exact same kinds of quarks and try to examine them, you can't tell one from the other. And these particles are spread all through the universe, and it make up everything that is matter. So everything, including us, are made of these cosmic energy particles. Our language fails in really trying to talk about them. I'm doing my best, but you have to actually use mathematics to figure it out. And I'm not a mathematician. I haven't done the math. But they've made predictions, and every prediction has come true after doing further study. So it's accepted science. So we have this completely unified connection with all matter and with all life. And how can we use this as a way to move forward, knowing that connection is everything, and that we need to look out and see a reflection of ourselves, but it's a different reflection. It just doesn't look like our bodies. And we have learned through just human experience in the family and treating one another that by using love, kindness, and respect, you can rarely go wrong. It's almost always right. And we need to expand our sense of self, so that when we act, we can see it as an act of self-interest. Because when we treat the environment well, if we treat other species kindly, then we are enhancing our own ability to live. So we need to learn that as a species. It's easy to just think of yourself, as one body, as one person, but that's not what our self is. We're part of a whole self. The whole universe is one self. And it's interesting to remember that to be alive is a sacred value. Everything that's alive has an inherent value. And so many of us have broken the connection with the value that they are alive and they have value. It has to start there. Just to be alive, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to pass any test or any course, or you have value. We all have value. And that's true of all the beings on all the planet. And one thing that life shares all throughout the family is that it is conscious and it is aware. Life is aware. Now, bacteria might be aware in a different way than we are, but that only makes sense. They're bacteria. That's how the life is manifesting. So humans have human awareness. Bacteria have bacteria awareness. They like to do things. We like to do things. Just is a variation. It's a flowering of it all. And life also works very hard to stay alive. Sometimes there's capitulation when it comes to the realization that it's over. There's no point in struggling anymore. But we've seen this in all life forms. Life really wants to live. It's a commonality. So who are we to end life? And I think the watchword for this is that we should tread lightly in our lives and the way we produce energy and distribute it. And if we err, we should err on treating species with kindness. Is our energy system treating the world with kindness? Well, no, not really. It is not. And I want to close with just one example of how we need to extend our awareness with regard to a single thing that we do. And this is the food that we eat. Now, I've been about a 99% vegan for many years, and I came to it for a variety of reasons. But one reason is that, if I had a chicken, would I want to kill the chicken, pluck it, and cut it up, and then, and do all that, and then eat it? And my answer is no. So I would not do that. So I'm not going to have other people do it. But I do not argue, even though this is true, I do not argue that eating meat is necessarily immoral or unethical, because we see the system, life eats life. That is the way the system works, especially all animals. But what we have done with meat consumption in this country is that we have industrialized it, just like we do with the energy system. And we treat, with these huge meat companies like Tyson, it's getting just slightly better, but it's still horrific. We treat these animals as if they were widgets, as if they're not alive, as if they don't have value, as if they don't have a right to go outside and be in the air and to not be forced to grow faster and then just to be killed for meat. These animals are alive, they have value, they have awareness, they have desires, and all that is stripped away, and they're just treated horribly. It's different if it's a farm-raised animal where they're outside, they're treated well, and then and they get to have sort of a normal life, and then at some point they're killed. I don't think that is morally wrong or spiritually wrong. When we treat animals like that on a societal basis, we dehumanize ourselves. We strip away some of the value that we have and the responsibility that we should have, because we're smart enough to know. We have the capacity to understand that. So this is something we really need to change. It also isn't, if all the world ate the same amount of meat that Western culture does, particularly in the US, we'd run out of land. It's very inefficient use of consolidating energy and food because it takes a lot of plant matter and things to make just a pound of meat. So we can't, as a species going forward, we can't eat as much meat as we do now. And that's only, we're able to do it because we've industrialized it. So I do think that is a dead end as far as eating that much meat. And we should definitely be giving them an option to enjoy life, the animals that are in the food chain, before being killed. And that is a way that we could humanely use the process of meat production in animals. So we have a long way to go to rehumanize ourselves and be in balance with nature. And I really pared everything down just so I could get through it. So anyway, thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was wonderful as always. And I see there was a lively discussion in the chat. Folks were really enjoying this. Sheila had an excellent analogy explaining how this is like a gift reciprocity society that you're highlighting. And some folks would love to see your notes later. If you'd be so kind as to send them along, because it looked like you had some notes. They'd love to, because you did have a lot of information, which would be really helpful.
Yeah, I can, I'll type it up and I don't know, I'll get it to you somehow and you can disseminate it out. Would that work?
That'd be great.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I know I did feel bad. I was so excited to have you come speak. And I was like, you know, with everything else going on in the world, I didn't want your message to be lost. So I appreciate you taking the time. And I thought it was just really beautiful.
It's the same problem. You know, it's just a different form. There are so many horrendous forms. And what happened to the Native American children is one of the horrendous forms of separatist worldviews.
That's true. Thank you. Friends, I think we have one more song and then a closing prayer from Sheila, if Sheila's still okay with that.
Each blade of grass, every wing that soars, the waves that sweep across a distant shore, make full the circle of God. Each laughing child, every gentle eye, a forest lit beneath a moon-bright sky, make full the circle of God. Each silent bar, every rounded stone, the buzz that echoes from a honeyed comb, make full the circle of God. Each fire-brimmed star, every outstretched hand, the wind that leaps and sails across the land, make full the circle of God. Each icy peak, every patterned shell, the joyous chorus that the dawn foretells, make full the circle of God. Each cosmic hue, every creature's way, all form the beauty of this vast array, making full the circle of God.
Remembering the children, creator of our ancestors, who holds the spirits of our grandmothers and grandfathers, creator of all things animate, as all things are animate, creator of the spirits of our grandchildren. Remembering the grandchildren, remembering children today, we now pledge ourselves to speak the truth and with our hearts and our souls to act upon the truth we have heard, of the injustices lived, of the sufferings inflicted, of the tears cried, of the misguided intentions imposed, and of the power of prejudice and racism which were allowed to smother the soul sounds and laughter of the forgotten children. Hear our cries of lament for what was allowed to happen and for what will never be. In speaking and hearing and acting upon the truth, may we as individuals and as nations meet the hope of a new beginning. Great Creator God, who desires that all creation live in harmony and peace, remembering the children, we dare to dream of a path of reconciliation, where apology from the heart leads to healing of the heart and the chance of restoring the circle, where justice walks with all, where respect leads to true partnership, where the power to change comes from each heart. Hear our prayer of hope and guide this country of Canada and this world of empires on a new and different path. Amen.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Thank you, friends, for being with us during this time. Thank you, Steve, for sharing your important message. And let's just all remember our connection to all beings, our connection to our Indigenous sisters and brothers, our connection to each other. And let us go forth and actually take care of one another and embrace each other from the heart. Amen.